What's up everyone? Wanted to do a quick video today because there's a pretty nice firmware update available now for the RANE 4. And to grab this firmware update, go to rane.com/downloads, look for the RANE 4 category, and then grab firmware version 1.7.0.8. So that's the firmware you're going to need, and so just download that firmware. If you haven't already installed the driver for the RANE 4, you're going to need to do that as well. And you're also going to need that for one of the features of the firmware update, which is a sharper cut-in for the crossfader, because you'll need to calibrate your crossfader so that the firmware update makes it super sharp without making it so that it bleeds to the other side. So I'll show you how to do that. It's really easy later on in the video, but you're going to need that firmware update, and you're also going to need the latest version of Serato, which was just released. And so that'll allow you to use some of these features of the firmware update for the 4. So one of those primary features is the stem level EQ. Now what this does is it transforms the 3-band EQ into stems control. So let's take a look at that. To enable it, you're just going to need to hold Shift and press the headphone Q button of the channel you want to use the stem level EQ on. So I'm going to use 2. You'll see that this is flashing. That means it's active. And now it'll control stems.
In the cut, I'm seeping out. Going sewing, creeping deeper. Going sewing. In the cut, I'm seeping out. Going sewing, creeping.
And that's pretty nice because then you can boost or reduce the level of stems versus just turning them on or off. Okay, and so that's the stem level EQ. I think it's a really cool feature, and really that is a big enough reason to update your RANE 4 firmware to the latest version. Now, a few other things added in the firmware update. There is a BPM copy that is a feature that was brought over from the A-Track 70 Signature Edition mixer from RANE. And this is really handy for like scratching and things like that, because you know, if you have a scratch track loaded up, like for example, I have a track here on the left side, left deck, and it's 95 beats per minute. So you know, sometimes scratch sentence tracks are like 100 beats per minute or 83 or something like that. Let's get a different sound. Hang on. Okay, so it's 95 beats per minute, and if I were to enable an echo effect on this side, for example, on channel 1, it's going to default to the 95 beats per minute. So if I'm scratching over this beat, see how the timing is off. So with this effect, or with this new feature, you just select the BPM of the beat with the joystick, so 120. You just hold Shift and you tap it to the left, and that copies it over to the other side. So it's a nice little feature addition. And then to reset your BPM back, you just have to hold the tap tempo button, and it brings it back to the 95 or whatever the BPM was of that track. So that's the BPM copy feature in the firmware. I think that's really cool. There are 2 new effects. One is called Choppa with an A, because why not? Because it's cool. And the other one is Mute. And so if you don't know to access additional effects on your 4, you just hold down the effects button and use the knob. So this one, we'll make sure we select Choppa, so we push that down, and then that's selected. Now the joystick's going to control the various patterns. There are 8 different patterns. You can also use the encoder to select reverse on or off. And we'll start with 1. I'll show you what it is. It's like a patterned gate effect, and we'll just put it on 1, and we'll use our noise so you can hear it a little easier. Okay, so let's turn this down. All right, here is the Choppa. And so it's like almost like a scratch style gate effect. You can start to hear some crab sounds in there. And then really I like 6, 7, and 8 are kind of my favorites. And then, so if we want to put it over a track, it would be something like this. So that's with the noise effect. You could obviously play like we were doing with the scratch sample. So like a little crabby crab there. All right, and so that is the choppa effect. The next effect added is the mute effect. And it's kind of an effect, but it's more of a utility if you ask me. So it allows you to use your toggles as transform switches. So like the old mixers where you could use a line phono switch to transform with, you can now use this mute effect. And again, you just hold down the effect button, scroll through all the available main effects, and then select the mute. So, okay, so right now the invert is off. And so I'm on deck 2, this is deck 2, and deck 1's over here. Now, if I were to invert this, it's going to mute everything. And so this could trip you up. So if you're playing with mute effect and you have no audio, it's because that's the effect. It only cuts in with the toggle. So that's the effect. Now, if you were to take this off, invert is off. So now this is basically a mute. So it's transforming it off. How I would use it if you wanted to use it like to do some crab scratches and stuff like that, because it is a spring-loaded toggle, which kind of makes sense. I would just make sure my playing deck is not selected. So I'd put that on 4, and then I'm going to go ahead and invert this. And then number 1 over here, so I know my sample. So that's a nice little effect you can play around with. And then another nice addition in this firmware update is you can deselect your effect buttons. So for example, say I was getting mixed up and I muted it on my mute effect, I can just deselect it by pressing it. Before you had to pick a different effect. Now you can just deselect your effects. So that is the mute effect. And that other nice little addition in your menu, access your menu by holding shift and pressing the hardware software effects button. You have the ability to change your main meter signal output to post main or pre-main. So what that means is, you have the main knob here. It has no effect because my VU meter is set to pre-main, and then I can set it to post main now. So then I can see that level of my main output versus the pre-output level. So that's another nice addition added. There are a bunch of other, odds and ends, and I recommend just going to rane.com/downloads and pulling the whole release notes list and just reading through it. But for me, another nice add-in is the crossfader. The bullet point on the release note says reduce crossfader cut-in at minimum to absolute physically smallest. So if you like a super sharp crossfader, this update will give you that. Again, so if we're in our menu, shift plus hardware software effects, go in our menu, scroll down to crossfader, cut in left, cut in right. So this is already at 0, which is where I set it. And I already did the update and I already calibrated my crossfader. I'll show you how to do that too, but that gets the crossfader cut in pretty sharp. So channel 1, we'll just use this noise effect just for an example. So we're off, and it's just barely a tap, and it's cut in. So it is pretty sharp. So very sharp. And really quickly, how you update that and calibrate your crossfader. We'll go over to the laptop here, and I already have it installed. If I were to open up the RANE 4 driver, it's going to have this one screen that says calibrate crossfader. And it's just going to click that, and it just says move it left and right. 2 times. And we're good. So that's what you're going to want to do that with this new firmware, because like I said, the update sharpens this crossfader quite a bit. And honestly, the first time I tried this, I did the firmware update and I had the Serato update, and I didn't do the calibration of the crossfader with the new firmware. And so I had bleed because it was setting it so sharp that without a new calibration of the crossfader, it was bleeding over to the other side. So just make sure that you do that to take advantage of that new sharper crossfader. So that is the latest RANE 4 firmware update, which is version 1.7.0.8. And again, if you want to grab this update, go to rane.com/downloads. You're going to need the driver and you're going to need the firmware update. And to update the firmware, it's really simple. You just plug in the controller to your laptop, make sure Serato's closed down, and then you're just going to open up that firmware updater and it'll take you through it step by step. It's really easy to do. And then you're going to want to grab that latest Serato DJ Pro download from Serato.com, and then you should be set. So that is the update. If you have questions about any of this stuff, let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer those questions about the 4. We're talking about the 4, people, not any other RANE controller at the moment. But let me know if you have questions about this update with the 4, and I hope you go out and enjoy it. Peace.